Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Navigating Trump 2.0. This, of course, the show that takes a look back at the week that was in Washington, D.C. through the lens of the second Trump administration. I'm John Stolnis. Joining me, as they do every week, Dan Andros, host of the Quick Start podcast, and David Brody, CBN News chief political analyst. And guys, the big story as we are sitting here recording early on Thursday afternoon is President Trump is finishing up his trip to the Middle East, a consequential trip to the Middle East. A number of big stops: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and he's had a lot to say this week that has really caught a lot of people's attention. In fact, David, he delivered a speech this week that some are calling the most important of his presidency so far, laying out a very different vision for the future for the Middle East, one that he says is based on economics rather than idealism, rather than nation building. I want to read a key line from his speech and get your thoughts on it. He said, "In recent years, far too many American presidents have been afflicted with the notion that it's our job to look into the souls of foreign leaders and use U.S. policy to dispense justice for their sins. I believe it is God's job to sit in judgment, my job to defend America, and to promote the fundamental interest of stability, prosperity, and peace. That's what I really want to do." David, your thoughts on that line in particular, and anything else you heard from him in these speeches this week that really caught your ear?
Well, boy, there's so much to unpack here. I'll try to be brief, which is the famous last words, which means I'm probably not going to be brief. But no, I'll try. Um, where do I begin? Peace. That's what he wants. Peace. He was asked a while back what he wanted his legacy to be, and he said that he wanted to be a peacemaker. That was his number one important part of what he wants his legacy to be about. Well, that's what we're seeing play out in terms of why he does what he does. Look, it's very outside the box. I mean, look at the Syrian president, right? I mean, let's look at the Syrian president for a second, okay? The Syrian president is a jihadist. The Syrian president's a bad dude. The Syrian president is persecuting Christians. The Syrian president used to be with Al Qaeda, then formed the splinter group off of Al Qaeda, and then was actually arrested and put in a jail run by Americans and Iraqis as well from 2006 to 2011. He was in jail for 5 years for planting explosives. That's the guy Trump met with. And he's going to lift sanctions on Syria. So it's definitely outside the box. But why is he doing that? Well, the answer will be, quote, peace. Well, what does that mean exactly? He's trying to isolate Iran by getting Syria to come to the table. Because remember, Trump always wants something, right? It's always transactional. So if I'm going to lift sanctions on you, you're going to do something for me. And he definitely wants Syria to partner maybe in an Abraham Accords, recognizing the state of Israel. He wants economic cooperation with Syria. Same thing along the lines with Saudi Arabia. He wants Saudi Arabia to come to the table on Abraham Accords and get economic cooperation. And of course, we know the Saudis can't stand the Iranians. So there's all of that at play from a geopolitical four-dimensional chess portion of it. But what troubles me here is that there's a moral aspect to this big time. And Trump seems to be putting that aside. In other words, these guys, especially in Qatar, right, they are funding Hamas terrorists. It's a safe haven for Hamas's leaders in Qatar. This is a well-known established fact. And Trump is turning a blind eye to it. When I say blind eye, he knows it, but is like, okay, whatever, what can I get out of the deal? And that's very different and very tough, I think, for a lot of conservatives to swallow, that they're going to trust Trump here. And the reason they're going to trust him is because they say he's not Biden. Biden came across as weak and would get taken advantage of, but they know with Trump, because he's an art of the deal guy, because he's got strength, they will give him more leash. They will give him more latitude here. And I think that's part of it. But in answer to your question, one of the things I thought that struck me as to what you were talking about, John, specifically on that Saudi speech, is that he basically was saying nation building wasn't working. And it's true. Nation building wasn't working. We were getting in long, drawn-out wars, whether it be Afghanistan, you just go down the list. And he was basically like, look, America, we just need to mind our own business and stay, as we've heard before, isolationist. And so I don't know about being the most consequential speech. I mean, it's stuff I believe that we've heard from him before, maybe not in this big of a forum and maybe not in Saudi Arabia, but, this doesn't surprise me with Trump. So there's a lot to unpack here, but that's kind of where I'm at on it from an analysis standpoint.
Yeah, and I agree with a lot of what David said there. This is where I think Trump is surprisingly, like when I say surprisingly from like the mainstream media's perspective, I think very strong, because he comes at this with a fresh perspective, and there are pros and cons to that perspective, but I don't think that many people can argue that the nation building mode of the past, 20, 30, 40, 50 years has really worked, because all we end up getting is sort of a fake peace. So you look at Afghanistan, right? It's like all right, things are stable there. Yeah, until we take out our troops, and then all of a sudden the Taliban just takes it over again. So you didn't really get anything. You haven't really changed anything. And so Trump's idea is, listen, we need to actually work to make these countries economically viable, and money will talk. I mean, like, people, when they're successful, how are you going to lure people into jihad when they're having a great life, and things are going well for them and their families? So I like the idea a lot. I think he's the guy to bring this message. Where I think the trouble is exactly what you pointed to, David, are the people, the leaders, the countries, the nations that have more of a jihadist mindset currently. How do you get them out of that? I don't know if Trump fully grasps exactly how, and maybe he does, I just don't know, but how suicidal some of these people are with their quests, looking at Iran. Like, they want to wipe Israel off the map. And Qatar, you mentioned, they're funding terrorists as well. How much will they be able to, can you negotiate with someone on the economic front if they don't really care, and their mission is to usher in the end times through some, crazy end times philosophy, with radicalism, whatever it might be. So that's sort of the problem, that can you overcome that? Can you rally enough of these nations? And it's a long-term thing, because, people are stuck in this jihad mode. You've got a large portion of the Middle East who are stuck in that mode. How do you get out of it? I just think the nation building thing hasn't worked over the years. And so I feel like, what do you have to lose to try this other approach? But so there's pros and cons to it, but I mean, I feel like that's where we're at.
Well, think about it too, John and Dan. What if this was Biden, right? I mean, MAGA would be all over Biden for this, to meet with the Syrian president and call him a young, attractive, handsome guy, and or talk about the Qatari emir there as someone like a great guy. What boy, I respect him so much. What? Like, if Biden said that, MAGA would be up in arms. So, spare me, some of this, I don't know, spare me some of that criticism at this point, because you don't really have any moral standing to talk now. Like, if you're going to get on Nancy Pelosi for meeting with Bashar al-Assad X amount of years ago, you can't bring that up anymore.
Right.
You just can't do it. So the whole moral card is out the window. Now, having said that, the Trump people and MAGA will push back and say the moral card, peace is moral. Peace is the moral card, which is true. So that's going to be their ultimate, quote, Trump card, to say we are playing the moral card. It's called peace and not world war. So I get it, but I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm kind of venturing into a little bit of my personal politics, which I have to be careful about. But I've got a real problem with the Trump administration, turning a blind eye to some of what these guys are all about. I think it's dangerous politics. I see the end goal. I see what they're trying to do, but I don't know, guys.
Well, and I think what we're seeing is, and it kind of was part of the Russia-Ukraine conversation as well, as getting peace is great, but what is the cost of peace? Well, what are you giving up short-term and long-term, right? I mean, it seems as though a lot of what the president has been doing this week is trying to set up deals in these different countries. We know that that's kind of how he interacts with the world. And it seems to me, especially on the world stage, he doesn't really see things in terms of friends, allies, enemies, adversaries. They're all different people that he could potentially do deals with. And he doesn't feel beholden to some of the decisions that his predecessors have made, that the country has made in the years previous. One of the other things he said that I wanted to mention was, he said, a new generation of leaders is transcending the ancient conflicts and tired divisions of the past and forging a future where the Middle East is defined by commerce not chaos, where it exports technology, not terrorism, and where people of different nations, religions, and creeds are building cities together, not bombing each other out of existence. That all sounds great. And if the countries and these cities in the Middle East were to all play by those same rules, then yes, you could see a Middle East revitalized with partnership with America and with Israel and with other Western nations that presumably previously have kind of held them at arm's length. The difference between President Trump's ability to speak on this now, and he mentioned President Bush and President Obama, was right after 9/11, a lot of these countries were seen as being terrorist havens. Right? There was not going to be, you couldn't make the speech, you couldn't make the argument of investment in the Middle East, partnering with these nations, partnering with these countries, because we were still at war with terrorists. That war has largely faded to the background now, although I'm sure it is still being waged in ways we don't see, but it is not the number one issue in America right now. There is no war on terror that we are actively fighting. We're out of Afghanistan. We are, for all intensive purposes, out of Iraq. So I guess, David, that's kind of where I land on this. Is I don't think Biden, I don't think Obama or Bush could have made this speech, because you're still fighting the war on terrorism and you're trying to get the world to see, don't side with the terrorists, side with America. This is the path that we've blazed for 200 years. This is the path forward for the next 200 years as well.
Yeah, such great points. I'll just say this. Trump couldn't make that speech, just like Obama and Bush could make that speech during the days of active terrorism. And it's always active terrorism, but you know what I mean. And yeah. I know what you're saying. But here's the difference in the way Trump sees it. He's coming off of his first term with the Abraham Accords, which were extremely successful. So he's trying to reshuffle the deck in the Middle East. And so it's a different time now, because what's been tried before hasn't really worked, right? So this is more geopolitical, to try to get Saudi Arabia and Syria and other players to the table to, if not be against Iran fully, to at least not be antagonistic against Israel in the region, which will lead to peace. So, I mean, I get it. In other words, he's doing this kind of based off his first term, which was the Abraham Accords, which were very successful. And this is going to be part two. And I think if Saudi Arabia, definitely Syria, but if Saudi Arabia comes to the table in a new Abraham Accords, that's going to be really region changing, Dan, for this administration and really the country, the world.
Yeah, I mean, it is going to be an interesting period because, you have to untangle so many. I mean, think of these foreign leaders like in Syria, where you have a country that's got who knows how many extremists and radical jihadists in this country who want to blow someone or another up. But they need you can't govern unless you have sort of the buy-in from some of these groups. So how do you manage that? So it is going to be a really challenging stretch to sort for Trump and for anyone who's trying to kind of get into this mode of like having people think about, commerce over chaos, which is a great line. But how are you going to sell that to these people who have been convinced, that America's the great Satan, or that Israel needs to be wiped off from the river to the sea? How do you convince all these millions of people over here who think that all of their problems, every problem that they have, is because of the West and because of Israel? Yeah. That is the challenge. And, and I think eventually at some point, if there was economic prosperity, I think you would have an incredibly strong argument. And I think you would probably win that long war. But getting there is the challenge. But again, for all the flaws in this approach, I think, again, what have you done for me lately? Look at the kind of the quote unquote fake piece that we have in a lot of these areas.
Yeah. And I think the fake peace argument is a really strong one, because you're right.
Yes.
There is in many of these cases, it looks like there's peace, but it's only being held up by the U.S. and you can only hold it up for so long before you have to let go and go hold on to something else, and
right.
The bottom falls out. That is certainly what we've seen in Afghanistan. Dan, one other aspect of this, and you touched on this a little bit in your comments, I want to hear a little bit from both of you about this a little bit more fully, is what this means for Israel. There's a lot of concern by many in Israel, the fact that the president didn't make Israel a part of this Middle East trip. And there's concern with some of the people that he's meeting with, that what does this mean for the U.S. policy on Israel? Like, where does Israel fit in the pecking order here? The president on Thursday doubled down on his idea that he wanted to make the Gaza Strip into what he calls a freedom zone, which would be, a proposal to displace Palestinians from the territory and remake it into a place of commerce, right? A big an area that would be full of opportunity, economic opportunity. Buildings and houses and communities and shopping centers and everything else. So what is your take, Dan, on what this might mean for Israel? Do they have a reason to be concerned at what they're hearing and what they're seeing from President Trump this week in the Middle East?
Well, behind the scenes, I mean, Mike Huckabee is saying, listen, nothing's changed. Everything is, our relationship with Israel is exactly the same as it was. We stand with Israel. That's how things are going. But our Jerusalem team, Chris Mitchell and the CBN team that's over there, they've told us that talking to people on the street there, they are concerned with the negotiating with Hamas, the plane talk, the palace in the sky, from Qatar. These are things that they're eyebrow raising at, like, wait a minute, what is going on here? But again, I think this is part of the new Trump strategy. He's got to get these other people to the table, and I think it appears his way of doing that is to talk to them and extend the olive branch and say, hey, like you said, David, pointing out like the compliments that he'll throw out there, and people are going, huh? And so this looks like it's his way of trying to get people to the table. I don't think it means that he's just abandoning Israel, but it's a tightrope to walk this, to try to get these other nations to the table, but then also maintain your support for our strong ally in Israel. And I don't know if he can walk it, David. I don't know what your perspective is on that, but I'm interested to hear it.
Well, here's the thing. Netanyahu's been wanting to bomb the you-know-what out of Iran for about 10 years or longer. So I think there's a philosophical divide here between Trump and Bibi. I mean, Bibi's like, look, strike while the iron is hot. The nuke sites in Iran are vulnerable right now. The defenses are down based on some of the previous bombing that Israel did inside of Iran. And this is the time. So, if Bibi was here in America, he'd be the ultimate neocon. And Trump is exactly the opposite. So I think that's the internal, or that's just the tension overall. And, Mike Huckabee and others can deny that, or basically say, look, the relationship is strong. And it is. I mean, it is strong. But there is this, once again, philosophical difference between the two at a critical juncture. And so I think we have to wait to see how that plays out.
Can I just point out real quick, John, before we move on this? I just have to say, for all the conspiracy theorists out here who think Jews control the world, I just want to know, how is it that Trump can get them to not bomb Iran if the Jews are controlling everything and Israel's controlling everything? Someone riddle me that, please. This just an aside point there.
Boom.
But I think that's a fair question. And Dan, I think what we're seeing here is not peace through strength. It's peace through negotiation, peace through business. Yeah. Can we? Yeah. I mean, and I think
that's the way he sees it. That's the way he sees it.
That's his foreign policy: peace through business, creating business deals, creating trade deals, creating deals with countries, both who are your friends and who might be your adversaries. If you're in business with each other, then you're less likely to be in conflict with each other. War interrupts business, right?
And the problem, and David, I'm sorry to jump in, but I think that's what I was saying earlier, is that I think this is where Trump views people saying everyone's got a leverage point and they want to make a deal. I just think with some of these nations, they're suicidal. They think that they're ushering in the end times, their profit to return, if they do the, deed of wiping Israel off the map. So I don't know that it's even possible to negotiate with that.
Well, I remember Trump sees the world as one big Excel spreadsheet. I mean, that's the truth, right? I mean, that's the deal, right? $243 billion from Qatar into America as it relates to infrastructure, economic, potential jobs, that type of thing. $600 billion Saudi Arabia. So this is how he sees it. Once again, back to make America great again. That's how he looks at things.
There's a lot more we could address here with this topic, but for the sake of variety, let's move on to one of the other big stories this week, and that is the slow dripping out of details from these books on former President Biden's presidency that are coming out. The book that's gotten a lot of attention this week is the one by Jake Tapper and Axios reporter Alex Thompson, who, just a couple of bullet points for those of you who haven't been paying attention to this. The Biden team discussed him needing a wheelchair in his second term if he stayed in the race and then beaten Trump. A lot of anger from some Democrats over Biden's delay in announcing that he was stepping aside. That's not a big surprise, but we're starting to get some people go on the record with that. The breaking point for actor George Clooney, the night of that large gala event that he and Julia Roberts hosted with Jimmy Kimmel and Barack Obama there, after seeing President Biden and his gait and the fact that he didn't recognize George Clooney at that event, he then a few days later called for Biden in an op-ed to step aside. And then it's clear that those close to Biden were shielding him from the press and from members of his own cabinet towards the end of the administration. David, what do these revelations tell us? First of all, is this important now that President Biden is no longer in office? We've kind of moved on. Is this important? Or is this just kind of more DC gossip? Or, is there something here that we really need to be paying attention to?
Well, it's important, first of all, because it's the biggest cover-up in American history. Just is. I mean, this is a cover-up not just by the White House, but by the media, both. And so I asked you guys a rhetorical question. This book has come out with some individual nuggets and reporting. Let me ask you this. Where was that in June of 2024, July, August, September, October? Where was it? If it was Trump, I guarantee you that would have been leaked. There's no doubt about that. If Trump was Biden, if you will. But it wasn't. So it was a cover-up. And this idea that the media missed the story, do we all agree? I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong. Do we all agree that that is not the word we should be using, that they missed the story?
Yeah.
They purposely ignored the story.
I want to answer that because I have a comparison, and it's a sports-related comparison, but I think it'll apply. I think people will get it. Right. So at the height of the steroid controversy, remember that year Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa were trying to break Roger Maris's long-held single-season home run record? There were reporters that saw Andros and saw other things that were in Mark McGwire's locker, and there had been rumors and speculation about baseball players using performance-enhancing drugs. I think most reporters kind of knew about it. There was some nuggets there. There was some reporting there. Some reporters, actually a handful here and there, were actually asking the question out loud, but nobody wanted to really dive into it. Nobody really wanted the answers because they didn't want to ruin the excitement of what was happening. They knew it was saving baseball. And I think a lot of that was the same thing that was happening with the Biden administration. People didn't want Donald Trump to win a second term, and they were either trying to ignore some of the things that were there, or slow pedal it, or there was a vested interest in not pursuing the story because of what it could mean. And that's the comparison I take it back to, is that the way the media handled the steroid issue in baseball is kind of the way they handled the Biden issue in his last administration. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's good. Go ahead, Dan.
I completely agree with that. And I think the way you know that that's accurate is look what happened the moment it was apparent to everyone that Biden was going to lose the election. It was after the debate.
Right.
It was, everyone just said, oh my goodness, there's no more hiding this. And then what did the media do after that, guys? I mean, we were talking about it on this segment, on this show. We were saying, wow, look at this, a media that's going full throttle into this issue. I mean, they were going after him to the point where they got him booted out, basically. There was so much heat from the media at that point about what is going on with his cognitive decline, and it came out of nowhere. And everyone else was saying, hey, wait a minute. This was apparent to everyone. All of us who have followed politics know Joe Biden. He was the vice president, and he wasn't like that. I mean, he was always been known for making gaffes and goofy, mistakes like that. But this was different, and I think everyone who's followed him could see it. And you're like, ooh, this is not good. And I think it is important, John and David. I think it is very important that we find out, less for the media. I mean, those of us who believe there's a bias in the media can kind of understand why that all happened. It just is what it is at this point. But I want to know about what was going on behind the scenes. I think Americans deserve answers. This is their president that is running the country. And for people were called conspiracy theorists when they were pointing out who is actually running the country right now. You know, they were shuffling Biden into meetings and like you wouldn't see him for weeks at a time. This is actually really, really bad. And I think Democrats who are on the one hand yelling at everybody for Republicans for being, oh, they're a threat to democracy. Meanwhile, at the same time, they're hiding this mental decline with Biden. And who knows is actually running the country? To what extent was Biden actually in charge? And then they get him booted off the ticket. And then, now we're seeing David Hogg get booted off. So who's really the threat to democracy here, number one? And number two, I do think that the American people deserve answers on this because they need to know who's actually running their country.
100%. We've lost faith in our public institutions. We've talked about this before. And the two of the big ones are the media and government. And we have a confluence of both that has gone on here. And I think we definitely need answers for sure. One last thing on this book, this Original Sin book by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. They say they talked to over 200, more than 200 Democrats about what was going on. So wait, let's unpack that statement for a second. So there were at least 200, there were more than 200 Democrats that knew exactly what was going on and said and did nothing at the time.
Yeah.
Nothing. And to me, I think the question is, and I'm not a lawyer, but what's the accountability there? What's the accountability? And what about the auto pen? We know that the auto pen has been used before sporadically at times. Obama used it. And Bush used it, I think, a couple of times when they were overseas and they needed something signed back for Congress. But Biden was using it regularly. So I think that could be the legal aspect to all of this as to how much was really going on behind the scenes to where Biden had no clue what he was signing. And does that make it null and void, some of what he was signing? I'm not saying that would be the case in terms of like, what is it? But I think that's an avenue to explore for sure. I think there's a lot more to this, And
we will see if these books trigger hearings, which I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, obviously, especially as long as Republicans still hold control of both houses of Congress up through the midterms, at least. Last thing, guys, air travel. You guys afraid to fly right now? There's a lot of negative headlines right now having to do with air travel. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy was in the hot seat at a congressional hearing this week talking about the aviation industry. There have been some big problems at Newark Airport, equipment going down, staffing shortages, and this is not just a Newark Airport thing. Obviously, you had that tragic incident above Reagan National Airport a couple of months ago. Lots of close calls, lots of discussion about, Sean Duffy has said that we have an antiquated air traffic system, aviation system, that it's been needed to be fixed for this is a decades old problem that we're dealing with now. I don't know the exact how bad like the actual physical equipment is or anything like that, but there are a lot of alarm bells being sounded, and it just seems like we're getting a lot of headlines about near misses and accidents and incidents. Thankfully, I mean the real tragedies have been very few and far between, but it's only a matter of time if you continue to have these kinds of close calls. Dan, are you more nervous about flying right now than maybe say you were a year ago, 2 years ago? Like what fills your heart when you know you got to go take a flight somewhere? Do you think about it?
First of all, number one, anytime I'm on a flight, the first thing I do when we're on that taxiway is I pray. I do it every time. Because I mean you're getting in a tube and you're zooming through the air. I mean it's a crazy thing when you actually think about it. So I always do pray at the takeoff and landing. Number one, I'm not I wouldn't say I'm scared. I mean I think overall the system is still really really good. But my friend Stu Bergier did a documentary on this actually before all the chaos started happening. He did it last year on how outdated and antiquated the system is, and it is insane. I mean, they're using floppy disks to store a lot of this information, and you're like, wait a minute, floppy disks? I haven't had one of those since 1988. What's going on there? So the thing needs to be updated. The system needs to be updated big time. But it's generally it works. You're gonna be pretty safe, but there's been enough incidences where we shouldn't be having any of them. I mean, this thing should be pretty locked down. So needs to be fixed. I'm not quite scared just yet, but that's about where I'm at.
I feel the same way. I mean, you're safer in the air than you are in a car, right? We hear it all the time, which is true. So we should probably be praying every time we drive, especially on the Beltway in Washington, for sure. So there's that. Will I maybe take a quick glance and go, oh, that's a through Newark, yeah, maybe I'll go through another airport. maybe that. Yeah. Or maybe I'll go buy a horse and buggy up in Amish land in Pennsylvania. But other than those two lifestyle changes, I think I'm good.
Well, I saw this article as I was doing some research for the show. There's a startup now that's attempting to bring Zeppelins back.
Oh, great!
Remember, that was really popular up until the Hindenburg, but in the 20s and 30s, you would use a Zeppelin to fly across the ocean.
Indiana Jones, no ticket.
Yeah, I think the Hindenburg kind of ended that whole discussion for me.
Yeah,
but now they have technology now where you're not filling a thing up with helium or whatever it is, and like a walking piece of dynamite. I mean, a flying piece of dynamite on a string across the ocean. I mean, they're saying it's a lot safer now, and they're going to try and start to build up a Zeppelin fleet. I don't know. Anybody willing to try a Zeppelin? I mean, I feel like that's...
No, I would try. Have you seen I saw a guy flying one of these the other day, actually, at a field. You ever see it looks like a little go-kart almost, and they put like a giant fan right behind it, and then like the little wings, and you just off they go. That looked really fun, but also I was like, if your fan goes down, I mean, that's bad news. But anyway, I'd probably do that before a Zeppelin.
I would go to a Led Zeppelin concert, but I would not go and watch. No, I would not go on a Zeppelin. I'm good. I'm fine. I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's wonderful. But then again, I'll go to Mars, but I don't want to go to Zeppelin.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm taking a 2-week car trip out to Utah with the family coming up. So I'll let you know whether a flight would have been a better idea.
Yeah.
You know,
I was just gonna say, John, invest in some of those, noise canceling headphones.
Yeah.
Do it.
And invest in mental health bills as well. That's a long car trip. Good luck on that, John. We'll be praying for you.
Thank you. Traveling mercies, right? Absolutely. Traveling mercies for everyone, no matter what mode of transportation you're using. Anyway, we'll leave it there for this week. Dan Andros, David Brody, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining me here on Navigating Trump 2.0.
All right, gentlemen.